So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker today, Grant von Elbridge. Grant holds a Master's in Science in Leading Sales Transformation through the Consalia Sales Business School and is a Doctor of Professional Studies in Sales Transformation through Middlesex University. A certified sales coach with the ILM and a founding fellow of the ISP. Grant is the sales transformation leader at Royal Caribbean International and is the creator of Scared So What, the model for personal change. Good morning, Grant. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Good morning. How are you today?
We're very well, thank you. And I know everybody's very eager to hear your topic today. So I'm going to, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Maria. And before I do start, I just want to give a great shout out to, excuse me, a shout out to Maria and to Patrick at the ISP and all the members there. The ISP is amazing at what they do in leading sales transformation and sales ethics. And through the CPD program, it is just an honor to work and to validate all the great efforts that people are doing around the world for sales. So thank you, Maria, and thank you, Patrick and team. All right, well, hello, everybody. Thanks for allowing me to be with you today. And so the topic that we want to talk about is, do I need to know about change management to lead in sales? That seems to be a loaded question. And many people will say, well, yeah, of course you do. You need to know a little bit about it. But some leaders will say, well, we have a change management team in our human resources division, and that's their job. And maybe that was true years ago, but it is no longer true today. And so I want to, hopefully by the end of this presentation and this discussion with you, hopefully you will see that we do need to learn more about change management, and we need to learn how to lead the way for our sales teams and help them with all that they do each and every day in embodying change. So for the first portion, I'd like to ask you a question. Excuse me. First conversation of the morning. So how do you manage personal change? Think about that for a moment. Have you ever been taught how to manage personal change for yourself? Probably you're saying no. You might know quite a bit about organizational change, and maybe you've come across a couple of models before in your work career path or throughout your life, and that would be commonplace. But personal change. So let me ask you this. Whenever you're having a conversation with somebody or you have a change scenario that happens to you, can be positive, could be negative, it doesn't really matter. Think for a positive change situation, like you're getting married, or you're buying a new house or a new car, or you're getting a promotion at work. Those are positive changes, but your body and your mind still goes through anxiety. You still experience fear. You still may experience rapid breathing, etc. So it doesn't matter if it's a positive change or a negative change. Your body and your mind is telling you, hey, something's wrong. I don't feel comfortable about this. And so in that scenario, whenever you've gone to share your experience with a friend, a colleague, mom, dad, brother, sister, or even maybe your supervisor, what did they say to you? Did they say to you, oh, don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. Don't stress. You're overthinking. Just don't focus too much on it. You're going to be great. Everything's going to be okay. Does any of that sound familiar? It probably does. And let me ask you this. Did their platitudes make you feel better? Probably not. And why is that? It's because they haven't been taught how to manage personal change for themselves either. So it doesn't matter if it's your friends, your family, your supervisors. This is a topic that we've not focused on. And through all the things that we go through in life, the one thing that is true and constant is change. And yes, it's personal. How you manage it makes it bearable and achievable. And so when those friends and colleagues or supervisors were telling you, don't worry about it, don't panic, don't overthink, that's all they could give you because they don't know how to manage personal change for themselves. And when it doesn't feel good, you go back to the same mantra of worry, stress, anxiety, and that affects your mental wellness and your mental being. And that's a problem. So what I've done is I've created a new process for you to learn, well, how do I manage that for myself? And there's reasons why, because people will say to me and challenge me, they say, yes, Grant, but my sales team, they're superstars. They don't feel change, they thrive in it. And I say, that's great, but what's underneath the surface? So you've got superstar salespeople that are out there every single day, and they're putting their best face forward. However, what's behind that face? What's behind the mask? So whenever they're out working with their deals, working with their customers, working with their B2B customers as well too, they face deal rejection, they face ghosting, they face pressure from internal organization for the revenue components and the KPIs they have to hit. They also face the opposite pressures from the customers in don't sell to me, I will buy what I want from. So they're caught in the middle with constant change. And as supervisors, do we ever ask our employees, do you accept this change? Do you embrace this change? Are you comfortable taking on this change? And we really truly don't ask ourselves as leaders, what happens if they're not on board? Or what happens if they're rejecting change at work? So that's kind of a loaded question, but it's something we have to start thinking about in the world we're living in today. And the answer, if they're not on board, things can go wrong. How many times have you seen a person like this, frustrated and just wanting to slam their fingers at the computer? You know, sometimes you won't even notice, and that's a problem. So the key to leading successful change management is to include the individual. You need to start to involve them, ask them, coach them, ensure that they feel included so that you can teach them how to manage personal change for themselves, and then they can learn to support each other. So it can't just be that we implement change at work and we just expect that our employees will magically accept the changes that we impose upon them. We've actually got to start helping them process the changes that we impose and also the change that they are experiencing within. As sales professionals, often our sales team work out in the field. So we're not with them each and every single day. So that means they're left to their own devices as to how they manage the change environments that they're having. Maybe you have given them a phone call. Maybe you've given them an email or 20 emails to say the directions that you want them to follow through. But yet the customer that they're dealing with is also countering and giving the changes back to them. So again, caught in the middle, that's personal change. How do you deal with it? And if you're an employee and you don't know how to deal with it and you go to a friend or supervisor, just as I shared with you earlier, and you share your frustration, the best they can give you is a platitude, something nice to say, you'll be okay. But we know truly deep down that we're not okay, and that doesn't work. So we want to start to begin to try to help them to learn to manage and reflect on the personal change. So why a new model? Why did I create a new model for leading personal change transformation in people? Well, there are many organizational change models that are out there today, and some might even say, aren't there enough? And yes, I've been told that quite a few times. But the answer is that if you focus on these models and you start to study them, they're brilliant at what they do, but they're also very prescriptive. These models, these organizational models, were designed to implement changes within organizations. So some of these might even look familiar to you. You have Lewin's freeze theory, you have Kotter's 8 steps, you have McKinsey's 7S, you have the SARA curve, which actually really was not invented or created by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but many seem to attribute and think that it was. And I know that, and you'll find the answer to that in my book, because I actually interviewed her son, who's the president of the Kubler-Ross Foundation. So it's amazing what's behind these models. You also have ADKAR by Prosky down at the bottom, which is absolutely one of my most favorites. And so you have all these different models, but again, these were designed to be used by organizations on their people. And in my master's program, in the sales master's program with Consalia Sales Business School, I learned about all of these organizational change models. And I was told that these are the variations of models, and there are more, that you would use as a leader of sales transformation to transform your sales team. You know, and what are we trying to transform them from? Well, we're trying to transform them from the 1980s tips and tricks and consultative sales processes to overcome objections and close sales, you've got to close a minimum of 3 times, you have to overcome 2 times. That's not where we live anymore. That worked for the 1980s and the 90s, but it no longer works today in the democracy we're living in. People don't want to be sold to. People don't want you to overcome their objections. So I was taught these so that I could utilize these to transform the thinking of today's salespeople and arm them with the latest sales science and psychology through the Sales Masters program. But being the typical American that I am, over here in Europe, in an English school, I had to raise my hand and object, and I had to challenge these models. And very nervously, I raised my hand to my professors and I said, I don't think that these work for me. And my professors, which was Dr. Philip Squire and the team, Tina and them, they looked at me and thought, oh gosh, what have we done and what is wrong with him? There was nothing wrong with me. I was actually having a really good moment to say, what about the individual? Think about that for a moment. In these models, do you see the individual person? I don't. And that's a problem for me. And so where's the model to help the individual learn how to manage personal change for themselves? And I asked that question, and my cohort, my fellow colleagues looked around and they were all stunned. And my professor said, well, perhaps you should make your own. And that's exactly what I did. So I think these models are great. And in my research, as it continued through my master's program, I proved that they were great. However, as I started to speak with many of the leaders who created these models and who lead change and transformation in people, they will tell you that the number one reason why organizational change falls apart is because you fail to include the individual. And if you go all the way to John Kotter, who has the 8 steps modules here as well too, he will tell you that 30% of organizational change management is successful. Now there's a myth out there. Somebody did the backwards math and said, okay, if 30% is successful, then that means 70% is failure. And that's just not true. Dr. David Wilkinson, who's the chief editor of the Oxford Review and a former police investigator before he turned academic, he actually investigated this and found this all the way back to John Kotter's research and said that that's not what he said. He said 30% is successful. The rest is a matter of possible failure to half success. And so, but what that boils down to is that change management will not be successful unless you include the individual, which is why I wanted to create a new model that focuses solely on the individual and their needs. And this is important for you as leaders. If you're leading your sales team, if you're leading anybody, you need to focus on what their wants and needs are. And so that's why we created it. So how do you do this? Well, the model is called Scared So What? And you can read about it in my new book, which is just available, Transforming Sales Management, Leading Sales Teams Through Change. I tell you, this book is not just for sales, it is for everybody. So whatever organization, whatever people you supervise and support, even your family members can benefit from this. But let me take you through this. So you can read the book, and I hope you do, but I'll actually share it with you. So why scared? Well, if you go into the science, that the heart of fear of change is called metathesophobia. And yeah, that's a big word, metathesophobia. But it is a clinical psychological instance that says, I am afraid of change. And that's at the extreme. But I think that we all fear that a little bit. So you've seen a lot and you've heard a lot about change resistance. People are resistant to change, and some people more than others. So that's why I chose to start at, well, what happens if we embrace the fear? And that's scared. So scared, fear, synonymous together. And so what are the feelings? What I want you to do is to start embracing the change that's happening to you. Don't run from it. So you don't have to go to mom, dad, brother, or sister, or to a supervisor and say, I've got this situation. I don't know what to do. Help me, help me. No, what I want you to do is to learn how to manage it for yourself and have a conversation with yourself and critically think. So, you know, we're great human beings. We can do a lot if we just learn. So at the center of this model is you. You and your change are synonymous together. And so you need to embrace that. So the change that's happening to you could be a deal rejection, could be ghosting from a client. It could be not able to get the value of the deal that we need. These changes, whatever they are, so many things. Could be personal. Could be I'm not having a good day with my supervisor or my colleagues, or there's a new organizational structure or process. Whatever it is, positive or negative, it's your change. It's happening with you. The outer bands are for you to start to frame up your thinking. And so this is the critical reflective journey that I'm inviting you to go on. And the goal, where the red arrow here is to break out with a favorable decision. So how many people here on the call have heard of assumption? Yeah? Usually when people make assumption, you don't get to a real good decision, do you? So that happens because people are not learning how to critically reflect through. They're making knee-jerk reactions or assumptions. And we don't want to do that, especially in business or in our personal life. So I want you to learn how to make an informed decision. That way you've got evidence and you've got critical reflection behind the decisions that you're making. So how does this work? So you're at the center. At the top band, you've got surprise. And so literally, I want you to start thinking, okay, here's the change. Am I surprised about it? Is it positive or is it negative? And start your reflective journey. Then you move on to say, right, am I conflicted about this change? Meaning I have uncertainty or I don't like it? Or can I champion this change? Is it a good change? And I think that I can do really well with it. I can succeed. Moving forward, you say, what actions could I take to bring in information? And this is the beauty of it. So instead of making assumptions, you ask yourself, what actions could I take? And this could be an action, could be asking a friend, could be asking a supervisor, it could be doing some Google research, which we love to do, especially when it comes to medical. We always love to find out what's wrong with us, don't we? Don't always trust that. Ask your physician. But you know, bringing in an action so that you can have information, and the art of doing that is you're bringing in information. So you're no longer making assumptions. You're actually educating yourself about the change that you're experiencing. And by now, you're starting to become a little bit more receptive, or maybe you're rejecting the change. And that's okay too. And why is that? Well, let me ask you this. Do you accept every single change that happens to you? No, of course you don't. Why would you? Not every change is for every person, and that's okay. But as supervisors at work, wouldn't you want to know who accepts the change or who rejects the change? Of course you would, because change adopters, you want to embrace those people and have them to help you to execute the changes within your work. The people who are rejecting change, as a good transformative supervisor, you should be reaching out to them. You should give them care and empathy and help them. Maybe they haven't done any critical reflection to find out what actions they could do. And if you can help them bring that information in, then maybe they can make a better decision. Or if the change is not for them, that's okay. You need to find a new way to help them. Maybe this role isn't right for them, and that's all right too. You know, we're not here to hold people hostage. We're here to help people and to empower people to be the best that they can possibly be. So that's the process. So people are getting to feel and understand receptive, rejective. But as action is so critically important, I want you to take one final step and say, have I explored every option and every opportunity? Is there anything else that I could do before I make an assumption or a decision? I want to make an informed decision, not an assumption. And if you can, then you move to the end point, which is decision. Now, did you make a favorable decision and say that this change is for me? Great. You're still going to be left saying, well, so what? So what can I do? Or so what does this change mean to me? Does that sound familiar, right? People say something, your supervisor says, you're going to do this and this and this, and you're sitting here going, okay, well, so what does that mean? Or what about me, right? That's because the individual change is so important to you. So if you've made a favorable decision, excellent, you're going to move on. If you've made an unfavorable decision, that's okay too. But at least you've thought it out. You've thought out the whole process. You didn't make assumptions. You actually brought in information. You asked friends. You did your own research. And so you can stand firm in the decision that you've made that this change is not for you. But you as well are going to be left saying, well, so what? What can I do? So what do I do next? Or so what does this mean for me? And at that point, you might be able to raise your hand to a supervisor and say, I don't like this. I don't think I can do this. What could I do next? And now you're still engaging, okay? There's a third element that's right in the middle, and it's called indecision. And let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you just say, gosh, I don't know what to do, right? I've thought about this and I thought about this and I'm unsure. Yeah, you're a human being. We all are there. We all feel that way sometimes. That's called indecision. And when you go through this, usually you're in indecision because you have not taken many actions to critically reflect and bring information in, or you haven't explored any other options or opportunities for you to be able to collect that data point so that you can make an informed decision. If you go back to the action items and actually try to collect information, usually you should be able to then make an informed decision either way. Okay, so that's critically important. So this is the scared wheel. And what I'm trying to say is embrace your fear. If you embrace the change, whether it's positive or negative, then you can actually critically think it through. And you don't have to be scared to use this model. So again, think like you're getting married, best day of your life, right? The bride is super happy and she's up there having a wonderful time and it's her super moments, but you always see the groom here just stone cold going, what am I doing? Well, that person's scared. So it's a positive situation, but if you just stop and think it through, you're going to be fine. You have a way to think it through. So it doesn't always have to be a scary situation. Now, something that's critically important is this model is not linear. It can't be. So unlike a lot of models that you see that are linear and prescriptive and say that you'll go through this, you'll feel this certain way, and you're magically going to accept the change, for me, that's not true. And actually for science, that's not true. So that's not how people learn. It's not how people think. Our thought process is scattered and very chaotic. And so the scared process looks something like this, if you can see it on my screen. You've got positive energy at the top, you've got neutral energy across the timeline, and you've got negative energy at the bottom. And all the little arrows are the way our mind thinks. We are very scattered creatures. Our minds are at fast pace, very random. And so you can go back and forth through this model. You can skip steps. You can go up, you can go down. Your moods can change because it's the way you think as a human being, right? So it's not going to be linear. But the goal is to get to the end point, the D, make a decision. And if you can see the staples here at the center, the A and the E, the action points, those are solid. If you do actions, you're going to move and bring information. You're going to move your decision making. And the goal, again, is to break out with a decision that works for you. If it's favorable, excellent. If it's unfavorable, there's nothing wrong with that. So what are you going to do? Now, this is where all of the organizational models stop. They say, again, prescriptive, the change is enacted. It's done. And unfortunately, I don't believe that to be true either. So just because an organization has said that the change is over, it doesn't mean that the people side of it are not feeling the effects of the change. So we need to make a so what, and we need to help people think about, well, what can they do about change? So just like in business or in life, you want to make a plan. You don't want to make assumptions. Assumption is the enemy, okay? When you make guesses and you're reacting to stress, you're not making informed decisions. So now that you have made a decision, you've focused on your fears, your anxieties, whether it's a positive or negative change, you've made a decision. So what will you do? Here, you are still at the center. You and your change are tied together because you've just made a decision about it. And the outer bands are your guiding points. And again, you can see with the red here, overtaking ownership, your goal is to break out with a plan to execute the plan in the way that you want your change to happen, not the way somebody else wants. So that's what's truly unique about this whole model is it focuses on you as the individual. We're not focused on the organization. I'm focused on you. So at the center of the change is you and your change. At the top, you have your strategy. So start to think, what is your strategy? What points will you put into your plan? What's important to you? Who do you need to evolve? Options and opportunities. Are there any other options or opportunities that you could consider that will support your plan so that it's going to be successful for you? Okay. So just like we are in everyday business life, I want you to put a plan together for your own life, for your own change processes that happen. And this doesn't have to be and all-encompassing. This could be just a pen and paper on a piece of paper, writing it down, or it could just be a mental thought. What's my strategy? What am I going to do? What are the options? And then ask yourself, do I have a way forward? And this is important because if you don't see this plan working, then you need to pause and critically reflect for yourself. Take the time to do it right. You've heard that a lot from your parents probably, or supervisors. If you're going to do something, do it right. Well, same thing with your personal change. If you don't see a way forward, then rework your strategy, rework the options, and maybe invite a supervisor, invite a friend and say, this is where I need your help to engage with me. This is what I'm thinking. Then if you can move forward, I want you to pause for a moment and say, right, do I have hope, or do I know how this change is going to work? Now, hope is a motivator. It is an internal motivation. It's your internal drive. If you have hope that this plan that you've put together will work, chances are you're going to see it through. And that's pretty important, to have that momentum and that internal driver. If you don't have that, the absence of hope, then you just kind of give about 50% of your time and your energy, and that's not good for anybody. And how, if you know how you're going to execute your change, then you'll have a greater propensity for success to do it because you've developed the plan. So you're thinking of this, the elements here in the wheel are kind of like a little personal coach. Think of it asking yourself a question. Hey, Grant, what's your strategy? What options will you do? Do you have a way forward, Grant? Yeah, I think I do. Okay. Do you have hope that it will work? Yes, I feel confident about my plan and I have hope and I know how I'm going to do it. If you can say that, then you move forward, and it's critically important for you, this last piece, because this is how your action plan is going to be successful. What actions will you take to execute your plan? Well, write that down. I'm going to call someone. I'm going to invite my supervisor. It may be emails. It may be appointments that I need to make. Whatever it is, make sure that you are taking the time to think of what you need to make your plan successful. And again, it's with customers, with supervisors, with internal stakeholders that you're working with on deals, on progresses to execute your deals with your customers, or anybody, for anybody inside the organization or at home. And then finally, how will you take ownership? That's critically important. This is where change falls apart, because we fail to take ownership of the change plans that we put in action. So what does taking ownership look like? It could be milestones. It could be important dates, times. It could be people that I've got to speak with. It could be customers that I need to close. It could be contracts that I need to get signed. It could be new offers that need to be negotiated. Whatever it is, you need to make sure you've got those points down. And then most importantly, it could be just you yourself celebrating that you did it. That's important as well. Did I execute my change in the way that I wanted to? Yes or no? Celebrate that and say congratulations. And if you're a supervisor, you definitely want to celebrate that, because you know salespeople, we love to be rewarded and we love to hear the praise as well too. It's not always about the money. That's good, but recognition is good too. And that's also critically important when it comes to personal change. So congratulating people for executing the change the way they wanted to, that gives reward and affirmation that they're doing something very well for themselves. And you want that as supervisors as well for them. So we put this together and you have Scared So What. It's a very simple plan that you can think through. It sounds a little complicated at first, but as you practice it, it just becomes a way of thought. And that's the critical point of what we want to happen. We want to change your thinking about fear, stress, anxiety, and encourage you to start embracing it with Scared So What. And you can do that. Now, to support your journey with this, I've also put it into an app. And this app is free for all individuals to download and use. So I encourage each and every one of you, and when I say it's free for you individuals to use, that's exactly what I mean. It's free, so download it and take advantage of it. And what you have inside the app, I'll show you here. So you've got the app itself. It's available on the Apple or Android Google Play. It's called Scared So What. You just download it for free, but you can see what's inside the app as well. So I've just given you a little demonstration of what you have inside it. So you can start to learn at the top about personal change. There are videos and tutorials to help you understand what's inside of it. But most importantly is the quiz. So whenever you have a change situation happening to you or with you or for you or your team, you can go into the quiz and you can actually start to think about it. And you answer 30 questions. They sound very familiar, but they're that way on purpose. And then you can see the results of your quiz in real action. And the change process, it's all about you. You can name it. You can tell if it's personal, business, whatever it is. Here you can see on the screen, you're just building it. And it's very simple. It's just a slide rule. You just start to slide and you answer the question. And again, you go through 30 of those, and some of them are very similar. And there's a reason why, because we ask you a question many different ways so that we can assess your mood as well and how you're feeling. This is all about your feelings. And then you get a video answer. There's also an expert that will come through on each element and tell you exactly what your score means and to help you reflect through that. So you're not alone. You're getting actual results to come back and support the decision and the recommendations that you're making. And it's real, it's yours. So this is all about you. Once you've made a decision, you can then go in and build your strategy plan, your so what. So we've got little milestones here for each element in the strategy, options, opportunities, your way forward. You can build your whole plan and save it. And when you save it, these are all saved for you on the home screen. So right there, my saved quizzes and plans, they'll all be available for you. So you can come back and it tells you the date that you did it. You can revisit it again. You can delete them. You can add new ones. So this is a tool that can live on with you for every types of change that's happening to you. And all of your results are stored until you delete them and move on to your next change situation that's happening. So it's a way of helping you to learn what is personal change, assess how you're feeling, and be able to build your action plan immediately for yourself. Now, this is free for individuals. If you'd like to have it at your organization, there's a licensing agreement that happens. I'm very flexible with that, so I'll work with you on that, but it's super achievable for everybody to have. But again, it's free for all individuals. And there are references, resources, published academia. There's my TED Talk. There's the journal. There's podcasts. So all these resources are available for you to help you to learn about personal change and how to navigate it. So that's the app. So that's available for everybody to utilize right now if you want to use that. So I would encourage you to download that so that you can start managing personal change for yourself. Who is this for? Now we've been building this and we've been putting this into play and practicing this all around the world since 2018, since I started into the master's program and when I developed Scared So What. I then took it also into my doctoral program as well too. We've tested this across the globe, literally Europe, Middle East, Africa, North America, South America, all different types of people, but it was primarily with good basic English knowledge. And what we found is through our B2B customers and our sales employees, they were using it for their families as well. And the really interesting thing is I had B2B customers that were coming to me and calling me and saying, Grant, I'm using this for my kids as young as 14 years old. And they said that they're embracing it so successfully, actually more successfully than the adults were. And in the research questions and asking them why, it's because children have less bias towards learning than we as adults do. And think about that for a moment. As adults, we're pretty set in our ways, so we think it's kind of hard, or we're pretty strong in our opinions towards learning. But the children, not so much. You know, they're in that environment. They're in that environment to learn, and so we have found that they actually are more accessible to learning the Scared So What principles. And if you think about your life journey and what we talked about at the beginning of this webinar, we haven't been taught how to manage personal change. So what happens if we do teach them? What happens if, you know, you think the school bully, or you think the jock football star who is getting ready to leave school and go into university or into a job? Life changes. You think of so many different instances that happen for people and the change that they're going through. Could we make different decisions if we actually thought about it? And the answer is yes, and the evidence proves that as well too. So it's literally for everybody. It currently sits in English. That's what the app and the model is designed for, but it definitely could translate. Also, we had through our research, well, what about leadership and coaching? And the answer, we surveyed over 1,100 people across the world in the effectiveness of Scared So What to be able to help people to manage personal change. And in some of the questions we asked them, we said, could this be used for leadership? Should this be used for leadership? And what about coaching as well? On the leadership standpoint, it was nearly 100% to say that this should be taught by leadership for leadership skill sets in helping their employees to be able to effectively learn how to manage personal change. And if you can have better bespoke conversations and one-on-ones with your employees, if you're being real with them, if you're talking about what happens to their daily lives and to them in their daily lives, then you're having impactful conversations. The same questions came around coaching. Could we use Scared So What as a coaching mechanism? Well, if you think about what coaching truly is, coaching is the art of facilitating open-ended questions. You're not giving advice. That would be mentoring. So they're very different. Mentoring is where you're sharing your experience, sharing your practices, and sharing advice. But in coaching, your job as a coach is to ask an open-ended question without bias, without objection. It's to ask that open question and prompt the coachee or the employee to think. That's what you want to happen in coaching. The answers are within people, but you need to practice the art of coaching so that you could get them to vocalize the answers and express it themselves. And when you do that, true coaching is the transfer of ownership. So if I'm coaching effectively and I'm asking the open-ended questions, then you are facilitating all of the answers and you will own it. If I tell you what to do as a supervisor or a leader, I'm being transactional and there's no ownership in that line of communication. It's just none. And think about that for a moment. If I tell you what to do as your supervisor, you go away and do it. If it doesn't work, you can come back to me and say, well, Grant, you told me what to do. Didn't work. There's no ownership. But if I work the opposite way through coaching, now I'm being a transformational leader. I'm taking off my supervisor hat and I'm coming with you and I'm helping to transfer the ownership over to you. I ask open-ended questions. You then have the thought process and you walk away. You owned the plan because you thought of it. Well, if you understand coaching, you can use Scared So What in exactly the same methodology as a coach or a leader. So I can sit and ask you, are you surprised about the change? So let's think about sales and the sales results. So you had a customer who failed to sign the contract and the salesperson is sitting in your office and you're one-on-one and they're panicking. I could ask them, so are you surprised about that? Are you conflicted or do you champion it? What actions could you take? Are you now receptive? Are you rejecting this? Could you explore any other options? And what decision have you made? So as a coach, I can ask those open-ended questions using Scared, and I know it's being more impactful and effective because it's about them. That's what you want to do. And then I could easily go into, so what? All right, what's your strategy? What options do you have? Do you have a way forward? Do you have a hope? Or do you know how you're going to do it? Right, okay, great. Well, what actions will you take? And how are you going to take ownership? It's an excellent acronym to help you in coaching your team members. And again, through the 1,100 people that participated in the survey in our research, they actually came back at 100% saying, yes, it can be used for leadership and coaching. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. It's a new way of thinking. It's called Scared So What. It's all about change and personal change, and we need to start enhancing our own leadership skills, and we need to include the individual. Now, Scared So What works perfectly for the individual person, and that's who we need to engage because these are the people that work with us each and every day, and we need them to be able to execute their change in the way they want. But that doesn't mean organizational change models are bad. No, in actuality, I would use Scared So What first, and then bring in the organizational change model once I know everybody's on board and put that organizational change model in process on top. They have to be used in together. Okay, so change is all encompassing. And as leaders, we need to embrace it. We need to empower our members to learn how to manage it. And that means that we need to learn the top organizational change models because they are important. They are critically important to your success. And we need to learn how to use them. but we also need to be inclusive of the individual's instincts and their ability to accept or reject change. And I want you to think about that as you go away today. If you're supervising others and you implement change, which we all do, just by sending emails, just by sending phone calls, just by communicating internally what the organization is wanting to do, we instigate change every single day. What do my employees think? Do they accept the changes that I'm implementing? Do they embrace them? Are they on board with the changes, or do they reject the changes? If you don't ask yourselves those questions, what are you truly leading? Or are you just being a transactional leader? If you learn this, you can empower yourself and your team members to learn to manage personal change. And that's when you have a recipe for change success. Scared So What puts that power to manage personal change in your hands, in the palm of your employees' hands, in the palm of your family members' hands, and your hands as well too. So it's a new tool. The question is, will you use it? I hope you will. My book is now out, and as a special gift to you, you can get it for a 20% discount. Here in England, the book is only £24.99, so that's not that much, but you can get a 20% discount when you go to koganpage.com and use this code, KoganPage20. If you're in the United States, it will publish in May 30th, but you can get the discount right now as well too in North America. And you can also get the app. As I said, the app is free for individual use. If you'd like it used within your organization, just reach out to me. I'll help you with that. I'll make sure that you have all of this methodology to learn, to implement, and to support your teams through change. I hope that you'll reach out and connect with me. There's my information below. I love LinkedIn. I'm passionate about LinkedIn, so please reach out and connect with me. And I, as Maria said, I'm a founding fellow with the ISP as well too, so I'm always here and championing the support for the ISP. So hopefully you've learned today, and I'd like to now open it up to see if there's any questions from anybody about the model or the process, or about how you can lead sales transformation within your organization for you. Maria?
Wonderful. Grant, thank you so much. It was really insightful. And I think the big takeaway from here is how important learning change management is, and the personal change for individuals. I think many times, I think there's so much sales transformation within organizations. And we know that sales transformation is a process of building or updating sales operations. But the fact that it actually takes the individuals into account, I think definitely creates a far higher success rate than a linear way or methodology. So very, thank you so much for your time on that. And there's some questions that have come through. So I'm just going to put them through to you. I have a question that's come through from Michael, and he says, if as an individual, I'm rejecting change, but I recognize that this is not a sustainable position in my organization, can I use the model to help me find a route to accepting change? And how might it do this?
So let me see if I understand. So you're not accepting the changes that are happening at work? Was that correct?
Rejecting. I'm rejecting.
Yeah, you're
change.
rejecting. Perfect. And this is real, and this is what we don't talk about, right? And I love this. This is the intention of the model, is to expose whether people accept change or reject change. And as a leader within my organization, I want to know how to help those people who are rejecting change, because chances are they're missing some information, or chances are there are assumptions that have been made. And if I go and help that person with facts, evidence, and support them, maybe they can make a different decision. So if you are experiencing a change at work and you are finding yourself rejecting it, I would ask you to take the Scared quiz. Download the app and take the quiz. Chances are, when we reject change, and this is more often than not, you will see on the quiz results that your actions will be red. They'll be very low. And your explore will be red. It'll be very low as well too. And that is because assumption moved in too quick. And that means that we didn't do the research, we didn't email, we didn't call, we didn't investigate, we didn't do enough to get that to a positive state to say, yes, I've done this. When you can get it to a positive state, so if you take the quiz again and the actions and the explore goes to green, and let's say you still reject it, that's fine. That means that you've taken a critical approach at the change process. You've investigated what the change means to you, but the change still is not right for you. And then you've got different directions you can go. You're starting to make a decision about it. And if it's rejecting, you then owe it to yourself to say, right, this is how I'm feeling about it. I'm no longer afraid of it. I've embraced it. So what? So what can I do? Your so what may be to go talk to your supervisor. Maybe your supervisor has information that you're not privy to. And maybe your supervisor can enlighten you. And maybe your supervisor has flexibility to say, you know what, this doesn't apply to you. This applies to everybody else. Or, yes, this applies to you, but how can I make it better for you? Now you're taking charge. Again, the enemy in change is making that assumption. So that's how I would do it. I would encourage you to take the quiz, download the app, take the quiz, and see physically what your results mean. And that will help you. And again, as I shared with you, when you click on each of the results, it pops up a new screen and a video expert comes up to say and tell you. And that helps with your learning process too, right? Because that's an action. You're learning.
Thank you so much, Grant. I think that was a great answer. The one thing I wanted to personally ask you is that with obviously the biggest factor here is fear. And I think that is where it all comes about. I think your psyche. So what you're saying is effectively address your fear and then take the actions in order to give you an outcome. But I think the most important part here is, wouldn't you say, is specifically in a work environment, because you can take this in both personal and work.
Yeah.
How important is it that your leaders and your supervisors understand this process? I think that is really important, because that's where the buy-in comes from.
Yeah.
Am I correct in seeing it that way?
You're absolutely right. And it's critically important, which is why I have made it I've made it for individuals to be free. So the model is published for the world and the app is free for the world to actually download and use, because people can take it and learn what is personal change through the first series, as I showed you. There are videos set up to teach people what it is and how it is. And then they can take the Scared quiz and build their own so what plan together. And there are resources on my website as well to support the individual. But for organizations, I am licensing it to organizations. And the reason I do that is because I want to talk with you. If the supervisory leadership is not on board, this won't work. And you know what? I won't license it to you, because I just won't, because this can't be another tick box approach. That is transactional leadership. Transformational leadership is about getting people involved and getting people on board. And so at work, we need to assess that the leadership understands how Scared So What is utilized, understands that we have a true environment for coaching and development, and then you utilize and mobilize the tool. You put it out to all of the employees so that they can start utilizing it for their daily lives. And again, the evidence is out there, folks. If global organizational change models and leaderships from the past 100 years tell you that 30% of change at work works, that is a big bucket that doesn't work. And they tell you the reason why is because we don't focus on the individuals. Scared So What does that. I'm here to tell you, we've researched this globally for 6 years now. It works. And so you're putting the power of inclusion. And so you think of diversity inclusion, you're including the individual's thought. So whenever you're implementing change at work, or our sales jobs or our daily work life, how many times do you think and you focus on your calendar, right? If one more meeting pops up, if one more person calls me, that's personal change. And we teach people, well, how can I manage that? Well, you can learn to block your calendar. You can learn to take control over your own personal life so that you're not so consumed. So it's just learning how to manage that. And yes, supervisors need to learn the model themselves first before they would roll this out with their team so that they can support them and embrace them.
Fantastic. Another question's come through from Warren Webb. As a leader, how do you create a plan B if your team were, after following the process, reject the change? Interesting. Good question.
It is very good. Yeah, because sometimes, Warren, thank you for this. How many times at work do we get a directive from up on high? This is the change, just do it, right? And is that always right? Transformational leadership gives you the ability to challenge that. So you've got to follow the directives that the senior leadership gives you. But what I would do is I would utilize Scared So What first as my first methodology. I would have people take the quiz really quickly, and then encourage them that we have an open environment. If you're a transactional leader, this is going to be tough. If you're a leader that sits there and points your fingers and says you have to do this, this, and this, and you expect them to do, this won't work. Okay? And transactional leadership is kind of dying out. Fear mongering and leading by fear, it just doesn't work anymore. In the democracy, you're going to have a short career. But if you're a transformational leader and you can say, right team, let's do this together. Can we take the Scared quiz? Great. Will you share with me? How do you feel about this? Where are you? Excellent. We could work together as a team because there's strength in numbers. And sometimes other team members can bring in information points that you might not have thought about. And now you're working smarter and you're working stronger. So let's say that they go through, they do the Scared quiz, and the people that have accepted the change are already moving on to their so what. And this is great because as a supervisor, you see your teams are engaged, they're owning it. It's Scared So What is the coach. It's allowing them to create their own plan together. But let's say you've got people that are rejecting it. This is important for you, Warren, because you need to know who's not on board with the changes that you're executing or you're implementing. And then what you're going to have to do is individually work with those members who are not on board with it. And consider this a blessing because most of the times, as I shared with you earlier, you wouldn't know. And those people will slowly reject. They may leave. You may have attrition. You may have people start to not show up to work, calling in sick, etc. But at least now you're aware of it. You don't want to go there. You want to be able to engage with them and say, let's talk about it. What are you feeling? And if you can't talk it through and give them more information, then you can have an honest conversation with them and say, what would you like to do? And how do I help you? Maybe you have to have that tough conversation that this job is just not for you. And if so, that's all right. Then you ask them, is there something else within the company that you might like to do? So I'm encouraging you to be that transformational leader. Use this to find out the whys, find out the whats, and include people in on the journey. Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to have people more favorable because you've included them. But it's important to be aware of those who are not on the journey so you can help them as well too. In the past, if you didn't have this, you just fly through. Can't do that anymore. We've got to bring people on the journey.
Fantastic. Thank you. One more question's popped through. You used the term democracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new one on me. What does it mean? And that's the question that's come from Patrick.
Oh, Patrick, thank you. So in the master's program with Dr. Philip Squire, we learned about Dr. Julian Birkinshaw, who is a global researcher, and he has coined the eras. He did extensive research on the eras that we live in. So the industrial age, the industrial era, the knowledge era, the digital revolution era that we live in. We're still in that today, but in about 2010, we transitioned into another era called the democracy. And it's a co-collaborative way that the salesperson, the individual has so much knowledge, so much digital information at hand, but also the seller, the person who's selling, also has competitive advantage because they have the same tools that evolve. And the way people are making buying decisions today is through emotions. So emocracy, the emotional adhocracy that we're living in today. So it's an ad hoc, it's agile, but it's also based on emotions, and that's where it came from. And if you think about emotional buying today, how many people have 2 phones? One for your work and one for yourself. And where are we at dinner? We're taking pictures of ourselves, taking pictures of our food, taking pictures of everything. We live today in a digital emotional society. Gone are the days, for the most part, where people are doing extensive research, fact-finding, Forbes, Best Buy, or all the different kinds of ratings and etc. They're going off of how they feel. So it's all about emotional buying and emotional decision making. And as sellers in sales, we need to be cognizant of that. So that's where we're living today. We live in a democracy, an emotional era where we have equal collaboration between the seller and the consumer. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, it's a scientific way of looking at the era we're living in today. But in summation, you can't sell in the way you did in the 1980s. You can't use consultative sales techniques. You can't try to overcome my objections. You can't do closes that sell. You can't try to upsell without integrity and passion and relationship. It's all about emotional buying and well-being. And that means emotional selling as well.
Absolutely. And I think being very authentic as well with your clients, I think that's also a very important factor. Thank you so much, Grant. It really, really has been wonderful to have you on this in this session.